This is The Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral.com.
Good afternoon, Tuscaloosa, Internet World, West Alabama. How are you doing on this beautiful Friday afternoon right here in West Alabama? You're watching the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com. You're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon. You got us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter as well. We're going to have a fun Friday. We hope to cover a lot of ground on a Friday. We appreciate everybody who's joined us this week. You spent time with Hunter Johnson on Wednesday, Tide Hoops pregame and postgame show host. And we spent time with Michael Bronner yesterday, WNSP 105.5 radio man down in Mobile, talking all kinds of things. We're going to hit a couple quick topics real quick, and then we're going to reach out to some experts. We're going to have a bunch of Bama Central crew members join us today. We're going to have Katie Windham talking about Alabama gymnastics and softball. We'll have Will Miller talking about Alabama baseball, and Blake Byler talking about Alabama basketball. As all, 4 programs have huge weekends ahead, and we invite you guys to jump in and join us and follow all 4 programs right there at BamaCentral.com. You can follow Bama Central at BamaCentral SI on the Instagram machine, at Bama Central on X, and at Alabama Crimson Tide on Sports Illustrated on Facebook. Let's start with 3 quick headlines, and then we'll get into our friend Katie Windham and gymnastics and softball. 3 quick headlines. We're following up on yesterday's conversation with Michael Bronner and Eli Gold. The legendary broadcaster from the University of Alabama has announced that he has accepted a position to be the play-by-play broadcaster for the Nashville Cats. The Nashville Cats, Arena League team in Nashville. I actually went and saw the Nashville Cats. I was probably 12, 13 years old. They've been in Nashville, defunct, in Nashville again, defunct. The Arena League has been in and out of business, but Eli Gold is going to continue being full-time play-by-play guy with the Nashville Cats, and if that's what he wants to do, we wish him very, very well. Seems like an odd choice to choose to continue to be a full-time play-by-play guy in an arena football league rather than be part-time in a very celebrated role here with the Crimson Tide Sports Network. But every man and woman is entitled to do whatever they want to do professionally and chase their goals professionally. So you wish him well, and you kind of just wash your hands of the situation and move on. We'll see how A-Day sounds with Chris Stewart and Tyler Watts and the rest of the Crimson Tide Sports Network crew. So that's kind of closing the loop on Eli Gold. He did accept a new job with the Nashville Cats. If you are missing his football coverage, you can check out the Nashville Cats. I think they get rolling here in a couple of months. I think they're more of a summer league team, the arena football. So he's going to be very, very busy with that. We're going to continue with Mohamed Wagi. We hit it just very quickly yesterday with Michael Bronner. It was what he did dirty, was it not? Mohamed Wagi got suspended 1 game, and I was in the building on Wednesday. It was hard to see it from our vantage point, and they didn't really put up a replay in the Coleman Coliseum on the big screen. But seeing it on Twitter after, Wagi falls and elbows a Florida forward, basically battling for a first half rebound. And from our vantage point over in the media room, over in the media section, it kind of just looked like a scrum. But seeing it afterwards, you see, you got the full elbow right onto the Florida player, the people's elbow for Mohamed Wagi. And I told some of my friends that was it intentional? I don't know that it's intentional. I think Mohamed Wagi is maybe just a little bit clumsy, perhaps. But yes, does it fall into dirty? I guess maybe it's your first level of dirty. I don't think he's a dirty player. I don't think he's I just think it was maybe a heightened sense of competitive moment, maybe a raised competitive spirit moment for Mohamed Wagi. Obviously, a lot of the detractors are pointing out Mohamed Wagi's kind of foot stomping moment on Janai Broome 3-4 weeks ago here in Coleman Coliseum as well. Again, I don't think Mohamed Wagi is a dirty player. I think Coach Nate Oates addressed it in the Coleman Coliseum media room today, saying he's a nice guy, but we don't tolerate those decisions. He's a good kid. He's apologized to the Florida player and was apologetic to me in our meeting. So you move on. Is it a big deal? I guess it is if you are a Auburn fan or an Arkansas fan or a Tennessee fan, or if you're outside of the Alabama family. And maybe I am not receiving it as a big deal as it should be, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. I just think it was, you got in the heat of a moment, a heat of battle, kind of a play. And Muhammad Wayi, he sits out. He's suspended for Saturday's game. We're going to talk about Saturday's game with Blake Byler at about 11:30. Alabama goes to Kentucky with 4 or 5 games left in the season, and you're looking at the SEC weekend slate. We'll go ahead and knock out our SEC basketball picks, and then we'll get Katie Windham in here to talk about gymnastics in softball, and we'll hit all the sports right here at the Capstone. So before we hit Katie, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 SEC games. Everybody is in action tomorrow across the conference. Alabama still with its 1-game lead over Tennessee, barely hanging on. Let's start with 11 a.m. Oh my gosh, do you even have to watch Missouri and Arkansas? Sleep in. Missouri and Arkansas. Arkansas is going to win. Missouri, Missouri's going to end winless this season. At noon, Vanderbilt goes to Florida. Florida is going to beat the brakes off of them after coming up a little bit short in Coleman Coliseum. Probably don't even need to pay attention to that game as well. Then 2:30 presents kind of an interesting game. SEC Network, number 20, South Carolina goes to Ole Miss. And Ole Miss is finding themselves a little bit on the bubble. South Carolina obviously got all the way up to pretty much tied for first in the SEC and now has fallen off just a little bit, losing to LSU most recently. I think it presents an interesting game. You're waiting on Alabama and Kentucky to tip off at 3 p.m. Just flip it over. Watch the first half. I'll take Ole Miss in an upset. We'll take Ole Miss in an upset to win that game, to keep them on the right side of the bubble. Then 5 o'clock, number 14, Auburn goes to Georgia. Goodness gracious, the Georgia Bulldogs, how many close games have they been in with top contenders only to let them slip? I think the trend will continue. The Auburn Tigers will go into Stegeman Coliseum and beat the Georgia Bulldogs. You got a weird, interesting, fun game. Texas A&M is going to Tennessee at 7 o'clock. You remember A&M beat Tennessee about 2.5 weeks ago over in College Station, but A&M since then lost to Vanderbilt, lost to Alabama, and lost to Arkansas. They are now on the wrong side of the bubble conversation. A win in Knoxville would not only be huge for the A&M tournament hopes, it would be massive for Alabama's hopes of winning the SEC regular season championship. But I'm taking Tennessee. I think Texas A&M is a bit broken. I think Tennessee is starting to find, trying to get things ready for the postseason stretch. And then at 7:30, another not so attractive game on SEC Network. Mississippi State is going to LSU. Oh, goodness gracious. We'll keep it rolling. We'll say LSU stays hot. You beat South Carolina. You beat Kentucky. We'll say you go back home and you beat Mississippi State. All right, and lastly, obviously, the game everybody's going to be watching is number 13, Alabama, and number 17, Kentucky. We'll get into it much, much more with Blake Byler. Oh, goodness gracious. My Homer glasses says Alabama will win, but Kentucky coming off a loss against LSU after beating Auburn on the road and beating Ole Miss handily. I think it's going to be a tough day for Alabama. And the Crimson Tide ends up with a 5 to 7 point loss. That's what my gut is telling me, and you got to listen to the gut over the heart. So that's going to be the 7-game slate for the SEC basketball tomorrow, and we'll get into that much, much further with Blake Byler as he travels up to Lexington. But let's put a pin in the basketball talk. Let's put a pin in the Eli Gold talk, and let's flip it over to tonight. Tonight in Coleman Coliseum, we're going to be having the 20th annual Power of Pink meet. You can read about it right there on BamaCentral.com. Our friend Katie Windham has a great piece about the Power of Pink meet and how it's changed and developed over the years and what to expect tonight in Coleman Coliseum. Not only is the Power of Pink meet, which should bring out a big crowd as well, but it's the Georgia Bulldogs. People think about Georgia football, but Georgia gymnastics is pretty daggum good as well. Katie Windham, you can follow her at Katie Windham _, on the X machine, and she leads all of our coverage here at Bama Central. How are you doing today on a Friday?
I'm good, Joe. I'm good.
Thank you so much for joining me. I think I see you've got your pink on. Are you going to be keeping the same shirt, keeping the same outfit tonight? You getting in the spirit?
I probably have another pink shirt I'm actually going to change into, but I just put this one on for this.
Well,
this
appreciate you doing that, getting dressed up for all our viewers. You can see Katie Windham if you like to watch the show on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter as well. So, Katie, let's get into you're in your busy season. Or what isn't your busy season? You lead our football coverage. You're all over our basketball coverage, but now you are involved in softball and gymnastics. So many spinning plates in the air for you as sports are colliding and intersecting. What's this like for you? It's just for you personally. With all these sports, many people are like, "Oh, I'm an Alabama football fan," or "I'm an Alabama softball fan." They got their favorite sports, and that's cool. That's no problem. What's it like for you balancing multiple sports? Of one, it's your job, but two, you're interested as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely, I would say, my busiest time of year. I think people think football season is, which for some writers it is, but really, the spring, these last weeks of February, first weeks of March, when you have, gymnastics, softball, basketball, spring football start up in a couple weeks. It's a lot going on. And really, because of that, I'm not always at everything right now because there are overlapping things. So like last weekend, I was at the softball games on Friday, but not Saturday and Sunday because I was at basketball. So shout out to Matthew for filling in for me some at softball. But yeah, it's definitely a hectic time of year and a lot to keep up with. And I don't think there's very many people. I would venture that there's no one else on the beat that could name everyone on the basketball, gymnastics, and softball roster.
Oh, well, you've got me beat for sure. I've got about 4 or 5 softball girls, 4 or 5 of the softball ladies. I think I got about the same 3 or 4 of the gymnastics ladies. I don't have the whole roster, so oh gosh, bad -1 for me and gold star for you. Why don't you start and tell us about these gymnastics ladies? I mean, they are 3/4 of the way through their season. About at this point, they've had a week off or so. They had last week off, and then they had a competition on Monday. A weird competition on Monday, at least calendar wise, and then a huge one tonight going back into SEC play. Put us into. You've gotten to this point. You started off really good. Weird lull. Tell us about the Monday competition and then set us up for tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not your normal schedule of having 2 meets in 1 week, but we didn't talk to Ashley Johnson in like a media setting this week. She had like a last minute thing, but then they let us watch a little bit of practice and we talked to her a little bit. But in the press release that Alabama released coming up to this meet, she said that this scheduling was very intentional and kind of preparing them for the quick turnaround of postseason, because once you get into the NCAA tournament, you can compete, one day and then have to compete the next. And so, obviously this isn't as quick as that, but I think with this travel schedule kind of in between, it was a quick turnaround. And on Monday, they had their best meet of the season scoring wise. I did not watch it because it was behind a paywall, and I'm sorry, it wasn't worth it for me. But I was keeping up with the scores and kind of getting updates from the SID and keeping up with what I could see on Twitter, and then just kind of talking to the coaches and some of the gymnasts this week. Yeah, I mean, it was their best. It was their most complete performance of the season so far, but I still think it's definitely not their ceiling. I don't know if the judging was just a little stricter on beam because that was their lowest score. It still wasn't a bad score. It's just no one was scoring in the 9-9 range on beam, especially compared to some of the other events. But it was a quad meet on Monday, which means there's 4 teams competing at once, whereas tonight in a dual meet, one Alabama gymnast will go, everyone will watch her routine, then a Georgia gymnast will go and whereas in a quad meet, it just everyone's going at once. There's multiple, like the floor music's playing, the vault will finish really fast because that routine takes 5 seconds compared to a floor routine that's a minute and a half. And so with the quad meet too, there's sets of judges at each event, whereas in a dual meet, there's 2 such judges, and then they kind of switch at the halfway point. It's hard in college gymnastics. It's truly a subjective sport. It's what the judges see or what they don't see. And so there's also a lot of times a little bit of leotard bias where you see programs like Oklahoma and LSU getting scored super high week after week, which they have very talented gymnasts that have big skills that should score high, but also the scoring can get really inflated at some places. And so it's really hard to know. But yeah, this team got off to a really strong start, kind of struggled, had a 2-week stretch where they struggled. And they kind of talked about that this week having the bye last week, I think really helped them. And we saw them have a really strong performance on Monday. And then I think they're going to come out strong tonight against Georgia with the Power of Pink, just kind of with all that energy in the building and building on that.
All right, so as you said, 7 p.m., Coleman Coliseum, the Power of Pink Alabama takes on the Georgia Bulldogs. You'll be able to follow all the live updates right there at BamaCentral.com, but encourage you guys to get to Coleman if you can. Support the ladies and support a great cause. What should we be looking for in Coleman Coliseum tonight? I mean, you've kind of outlined the story of the season. You're coming off your best meet. We all know Luisa Blanco. We all know, I guess, Lily Hudds, Glabi Gadia. Like, you know, the stars are kind of the same stars, the 5 super seniors, but there's a lot behind them, and I feel like every time I've watched the gymnastics this year as a casual observer, you just see so many different athletes from the Alabama perspective. Is it about time to and maybe I'm wrong, is it time for Ashley Johnson to say, here's my lineup on bar, here's my lineup on beam, here's my lineup on floor, and here's my lineup on vault, and just roll with it? Because it seems like, and maybe it's my uneducated opinion, that every event has been a different lineup as she's still experimenting. Help me reconcile that as we get towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're getting closer to the point that, because you are getting close to postseason, that you have the people that you know that you can count on in the beam lineup, in the bars lineup, in whatever lineup. But I also think they do use other people throughout the year. And you'll see some people that are competing in that same lineup every time. Like, I think Kay Machado has probably been in the bars lineup every time this year. But I also think they enter other people so that they can test that depth to see what they have. Because you also have, so 6 gymnasts go in each event, you get to drop the lowest score. So you can try somebody out, and if they don't do well, then you can hopefully drop that score and everyone else is going to pick up the slack. And so I think you're going to get, hopefully she's getting a little bit closer to what those solidified lineups are. But I think in gymnastics, you always see more people because you want to build that depth. Also because it's a sport that's really tough on the body. So to maybe give some people some rest. And just also because some people have different skills, and some weeks they'll talk about this in post game all the time, that somebody was practicing a vault well that week, and then in warm up, it's just not working. And so then they put somebody else in the lineup. And so I think this team has a lot of depth, and she continues to use it. But really, it's kind of a core of this team that is doing the same events over and over. We've seen Luisa Blanco will do the all around a lot, which means they compete in all 4 events. Lily Hudson will do it sometimes. And then the past 2 weeks, or maybe this past week was the first time, but I think the past 2 meets, Gabby Gladio has competed in the all around for the first time. She had previously never really competed bars for Alabama. So those are kind of, the core of this team. You see McCarr Doggett on bars all the time. Maddie Wild-Gore is kind of getting back in the lineups. And really, to me, a surprise of this team this year has been Kay Machado. She's just been so consistent, and she's been scoring really high on bars. And this past meet, she scored a 9.975 on bars, and assistant coach Justin Spring said they put her in that anchor spot where you're going to get probably judged a little bit more generously, because a lot of teams will put their best gymnasts at the end. And so they feel like she finally got the score she deserved by being in that spot. And so we'll see. Maybe tonight's the night somebody gets a 10 at Coleman Coliseum.
Maybe tonight's tonight, and you all will want to be there right there in Coleman Coliseum. And if you can't be there, you're going to want to read Katie Windham's live updates on BamaCentral.com. All right, let's flip it real quick before we get our man Blake Byler into the program. We got to get an update on softball. The ladies are 10+2. They're 12-0. No, 10+2. They're 11-0. They didn't have they had 1 midweek game. 11-0. Wins the Eastern Bama Bash. Wins the Buzz Classic in Atlanta. You beat North Alabama yesterday. What do you really take? I mean, you played, I guess, Virginia and Georgia Tech are the quality teams maybe in the first 11 games. Obviously, winning is you lose a game, it becomes massively important, and it becomes a talking point. So 11-0 is a great start against some of the lesser competition. The obvious question is, what do you do with Montana Fouts being gone? underlying issue is still the issue. I think you've been there with me, the hitting issue. Tell us about where we're at. 2 weeks in, so you're barely into anything. Where are we at with the hitting? Where are we at with this team? And what do we think that this team could be?
Yeah, it really is hard to know at this point just because the quality of opponent hasn't been great. And I think that's why it's kind of concerning that the hitting hasn't been great so far, which on Wednesday against North Alabama, they did run rule them. They did score 9 runs. We did see 2 home runs, which was a positive sign, especially after how things had gone in the weekend, which like I said earlier, I wasn't at the games on Saturday and Sunday, but Sunday they were facing a Southern Illinois team that the first day of the Bama Bash had lost to St. Thomas had gotten shut out by St. Thomas 5-0, who came into the Bama Bash at 0-5 and was a D3 team a couple years ago. So I'm thinking, Sunday, last day of the tournament, so Alabama will run roll them 13-0. They win 2-0 and only get 2 hits in the game. And obviously that's not what you want to see. And so it has been inconsistent from the offense so far. And, part of it could be when you're facing teams that are of a lower quality. I think a lot of times girls get those big eyes to play because they see the slower pitch coming in than what you're going to face in SEC play and think, I'm going to crush this out of the park. And then they get under it and they pop it up. Or you saw a lot of fly balls instead of, hitting it hard on the ground the last couple of games. And so it is hard to know so far. I think in the circle, though, you talked about replacing Montana Fouts. I think there's been a lot of encouraging signs. There was kind of 2 freak injuries over the weekend, which I wasn't there for either of them, but both Lauren Esmond and Jocelyn Brisky just kind of left the field in the middle of games. And Murph said earlier this week that they're day-to-day, but I think you've seen good stuff out of Kayla Beaver, the transfer from Central Arkansas, and from Jayla Torrance so far this year. And I think those are going to kind of be the 2 they rely on, or really Jocelyn Brisky, the freshman, may end up being the number 2 behind Beaver. But I think the key is that you have options. You have 6 pitchers, and that depth has already been tested in it because Alex Salter still hasn't pitched at all this year. I'm not really sure how much she will pitch this year or really how much they're going to need her, but you have that option. You have the depth of the 6 pitchers that if someone's off that weekend, or you have the opportunity to start 3 different people over in an SEC series weekend, where in the past, which it was a great option to have, Montana would start, Friday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday. She would start 2 games at least in a series, but now you have the option to kind of spread the wealth a little bit, which has been a positive sign in the circle so far. No matter who you're playing, the kind of shutouts they've had so far has been encouraging.
Absolutely. You want the defense to be playing at a high level, and that's always really been a staple of Patrick Murphy's program. Why don't you leave us with setting us up with the weekend, Katie Windham, the Green and Gold Classic. You're going up to Birmingham to play UAB, Western Carolina, I guess North Alabama again. Obviously, the competition isn't the elite Oklahoma, that sort of thing. What do you want to see out of this team? The half step, the 1% better, the next step forward in the long season, the long journey that is the year. What does this team need to do besides winning? Obviously, winning for this weekend.
Yeah, I think first of all, you want to stay undefeated because you talk about it, losing becomes a big thing. In softball, you play so many games that it's really not the end of the world. Alabama lost their first game last season to Lehigh and lost some head scratchers last year, and they still made it to Oklahoma City. So it's not the end of the world. But because I would say this is the easiest non-conference schedule Alabama's had since I've started covering the program. And so you need to win these games. And I'd say this weekend's field is probably the worst that they've played so far because there's not another Power 5 team there. And just yesterday when I was doing the How to Watch and kind of looking at the records of the other opponents, it's not great. So they need to win all 5 games. But what I want to see, or I think probably what fans want to see is, and what Murph I know wants to see is, can they pass the bat down? Can they string together hits? Can they string together innings? Can they just get people on base? That Southern Illinois game, they only had 2 hits. The bases, the Southern Illinois pitcher walked the bases loaded in the first inning, and they scored a run on a walk and a sac fly. So no RBI hit in that game. And so I think you want to see some people getting the key hit. That's what he talks about all the time, passing the bat down. And then I think really a key is going to be this weekend. Sorry, my computer just went to sleep.
Oh, you're good. You're good. No, you're with us. We got you.
I think if we're going to see some new people in the circle, maybe, I think it'll be a good sign if Alex Salter does get some innings in, if the 2 pitchers that were banged up can throw some innings, because you don't want to burn Beaver and Torrance which you're not going to burn them out, but this early in the season. But it would be nice to kind of, because you have that depth, spread the wealth. But also, if people are injured, this would be a weekend that you can rest them.
It's Katie Windham, and you can follow her at Katie Windham _. She leads all of our coverage right here at BamaCentral, directing all of our all of our people down here. Oh, Katie, tell everybody really what you're up to this weekend and where they can find you as you get out of here. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, so really this weekend, it's actually kind of convenient. I'm looking forward to I'm covering gymnastics tonight in Coleman, but then I don't think I have to cover anything else over the weekend because we have Kim Rankin, our new intern. She's going to be in Birmingham at all the softball games. So that'll be really nice to make sure to follow her coverage. And then Matthew and Blake, you're about to talk to Blake, will be in Lexington this weekend, so I don't have to cover basketball. And so I'm kind of looking forward to, in this season of chaos, I'm going to be enjoying a little bit of time off this weekend after covering gymnastics tonight, but I will be in Coleman tonight for the Power of Pink meet.
Follow Katie Windham and see her at the Power of Pink meet at Katie Windham _. Katie, have a great weekend. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep. And let's move right on into it. I mean, before we, I need to tell you about Druid City Music Hall before we bring in our friend Blake Byler. Tonight, the Stews are going to be playing at Druid City Music Hall, and you can get your tickets still at druidcitymusic.com. Look, they've got live music all the time. It is the premier place for live music on the Strip. So go down and see Druid City Music Hall. See the Stews tonight. I'm going to be there probably after the Power of Pink meet. That's going to be the one evening excursion for me this weekend. So if you want to say hello to me, or if you want to avoid me on the other side of the concert hall, see me at Druid City Music Hall tonight to see the Stews. All right, let's move into basketball. Oh, my gosh. Big Blue Nation on deck. You know him. Blake Byler joins us. Find him on the Twitter machine if you're not already following him at Blake Byler 45. He is about to be on the road going to Lexington. Oh, yeah. What's it going to be, Blake? You go into and you get an angry Kentucky this weekend. What in the world is Alabama running into?
Yeah, I mean, I actually left Nate Oates' press conference about an hour ago because they had it early today. They're traveling up to Lexington today. They haven't even practiced yet, so they're practicing once they get up there. And he was talking about that. He said, we're going to get the best version of Kentucky that we could because they're coming off of a really tough, heartbreaking loss on the road in Baton Rouge at LSU where I think it was Jordan Wright missed a shot, got blocked, threw it up, teammate grabs it and throws it in at the buzzer. They lose by 1 point. Coming off of that really big win against Auburn that they had on the road last Saturday, when you think that Kentucky's putting it together and they're starting to become what we thought they could be at the beginning of the season, they drop one of these weird games. But that just tells you they're going to be incredibly locked in for Saturday. So Alabama's going to have his hands full. Nate Oates also talked this morning about how Kentucky has one of the best backcourts or most talented backcourts was the wording that he used in the entire country. You've got Antonio Reeves, who is the third leading scorer in the SEC behind Mark Sears and Tennessee's Dalton Knecht. You have Reed Shepherd, one of the top guards in the draft. You have DJ Wagner, another one of the top guards in the draft. I think he's technically considered the top American guard draft prospect in this draft, and he comes off the bench for them. You've got Rob Dillingham, another really talented freshman who is probably the most talented shot maker that's going to be on the floor on Saturday. And so when you look at that backcourt and the way that Kentucky plays offense, it's going to be really tough for Alabama, especially for a team that I don't think Alabama's been terrible defensively, but they've had their fair share of struggles.
Blake, are you stealing my notes? Because I was going to go into the most talented comment and give you a hypothetical if you don't mind. You want to play a little game?
Go for it. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So NATO says, and just as you outlined, most talented backcourt or best backcourt we played this year. Alabama's backcourt's no slouch. You got Mark Sears, Estrada, Ryland Griffin, and hopefully you'll have Latrell back in action. They're pretty good. They're good players. We've obviously outlined throughout the year the disparity or little deficiencies defensively in the post play. Let's say Kai Spears doesn't exist and you haven't filled that last scholarship and the transfer portal doesn't have any restrictions. This is Blake Byler, magic mode, right? You get one player. You can draft one player off the Kentucky roster and put them on the Alabama basketball team. You taking one of those talented guards, or are you going to go with Ugano Onyenso?
That's a good question, honestly. I think based on what Alabama needs, I would go Onyenso or maybe like Aaron Bradshaw or like one of their bigs. Because if you're Alabama, you need a big more than you need a guard. Like you said, Alabama's their backcourt is just as good as Kentucky's. I think Kentucky's is better if you're looking in terms of NBA potential and talent. But when you're just talking about college basketball and the game that's going to happen Saturday, Alabama might have Kentucky beat in terms of their backcourt. You've got Mark Sears, who SEC Player of the Year, one of the front runners, alongside Dalton Knecht, one of the most underrated players in the country. But then Estrada and Rylan Griffin are right there, plus Latrell Wrightsell, who Nate Oates said was day-to-day, still dealing with the head injury from Monday's practice. But honestly, it would be really helpful for Alabama if he was able to go. We know that he's kind of been the X factor for Alabama in terms of his scoring, because Alabama's, I think, 10-0 when or 8-0, something like that. They're undefeated when he scores at least 10 points in these games. And on top of that, he's been one of Alabama's best perimeter defenders, probably the best outside of Rylan Griffin. So when you're looking at this Kentucky backcourt, having Wrightsell would be an incredibly nice added boost. But like we saw Wednesday, Alabama was able to take care of business and get the job done seemingly miraculously without Wrightsell on the floor. Sam Walters has stepped up in that spot, been able to give some good minutes. And so even if he's not able to go, I don't think that's a death blow to Alabama, so to speak.
Alabama going to Kentucky, maintaining a one-game lead in the SEC. Blake, look, you watch the last two Alabama basketball games. You beat A&M 100-75. You beat Florida 98-93 in overtime. But, the scores, great, awesome. But you look deeper into the games, and you think, how in the world is this Alabama basketball team, one, putting up the final number, 198, but two, emerging victorious? You lose a rebounding battle to A&M. Now, granted, their offense wasn't very good, but you lose a rebounding battle. Not lose. You got your butt kicked on the glass against A&M, and then you turn around and put up your worst three-point make percentage in Coleman Coliseum for the year, but you're still able to put up 98 points against Florida. Now, their defense is okay. It's good. Their KenPom defense was like 20-something, wasn't it? But the fact that, the difference is, I don't understand how this team is able to just mitigate every problem. Oh, you lost the rebounding battle by 15. Don't worry, we won by 25. Oh, you only made 6 3-point shots. Oh, we still scored 98 points. How do you define it? How do you quantify what I don't have any words to define this team.
Yeah, I think that this team isn't the one-trick pony that maybe people think they are whenever they think about Alabama basketball. Because people hear Alabama basketball, especially in recent years under Nate Oates, they think, oh, they shoot a lot of threes. That's all that they do. But the fact that Alabama has been able to win games in different ways, it's not just the three-point shooting that leads to this team winning games. And they've showed that the last two games. Alabama, like you said, against Texas A&M gets beat on the glass pretty badly. And they're still able to win going away by 25 because of that shooting, because of the way that they were able to shoot the ball at home. But then that shooting was gone, nowhere to be found against Florida. Alabama shoots 2 for 18 in the first half from three. Don't shoot as many three-point attempts in the second half, but still they made a couple. Sam Walters made a couple, but for the game, just 25%, which is well below their season average, at Coleman Coliseum, which I think is in the 40s percentage-wise. And still, they're able to actually dominate the paint. Grant Nelson had a great game. They had way more points than Florida inside the lane. They were able to win the rebounding battle, and they defended decently well down the stretch. They didn't really necessarily defend great the whole game, but what's been interesting about this team is that seemingly since that non-conference stretch back in November, December, where they lost a couple games, since SEC play started, Alabama has won every single close game it's been in. And I think that's because of the way that it played its non-conference schedule. They went into Purdue, or they went to Creighton, went to Arizona, played Purdue and Toronto. They were close in a lot of those games, but they lost them. They ended up giving the game away late. And I remember a press conference after that where Nate Oates got on the mic and he said, we've been really good for 75% of these games, but we have to learn how to win. And I think over the course of SEC play, you've seen Alabama actually be able to learn how to win. They've had the close game against Auburn at home, the close game against Florida at home, the comeback on the road against Georgia, like all of these close games. And normally Alabama's been either they've been blowing teams out or they've been getting blown out. But in the few instances where you've had these close games, Alabama has executed at a very high level down the stretch. They've found a way to dig in and get stops, even whenever for the majority of the game it doesn't look like they've been able to, and they've come out victorious. And I think that's absolutely because of the non-conference schedule they played, just the way that they've grown. They just find ways to win, and that's what's going to make them continue to be dangerous as the season goes on.
Blake, I'm with you there. We're sitting right next to each other for the Auburn game, and Auburn erases the 14-point deficit at halftime. And I thought, oh my! And then Auburn, I guess it was Donaldson hits a shot to give them a lead. Well, it just looks just like the Creighton game. You have the lead until about 12 minutes left. The character of this team has really impressed me. I mean, the deficiencies as far as the big man is obvious, but the character of this team, I think, has really, really grown over the last 3 months or so. So with that as context, put us 35 hours ahead of now. Saturday at 5 o'clock. The game is over. All right. Angry Kentucky, Big Blue Nation, blue blood of the sport. Let's say they bounce back and beat Alabama. Oh, gosh. You're still in a great position. How does Alabama take the 3 months and, we've grown, competitive character. This is a tough part of the schedule. I mean, look at all the quad one games in a row. Really tough part of the schedule. Only 5 games left. Let's say you've lost the Kentucky game. Oh, gosh. With 4 more games left, this team can still win the league if they do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even if Alabama loses to Kentucky, they're still in an excellent spot. They would still be tied for the lead in the SEC, given that Tennessee were to beat Texas A&M at home this weekend, which I'm very convinced that they are going to do, especially after losing their last meeting to them. So you'd be tied at 11-3 at the top of the SEC standings with Tennessee, and you look ahead 7 days, and that team is coming into your house. And so Alabama has everything in front of it, especially considering that the team that is challenging it the most for this SEC regular season title still has to come play in Coleman Coliseum. It couldn't have worked out better in terms of scheduling whenever that game has been slated to happen. And so I think it's fine if you lose this game, especially because it wouldn't be it would be a quad one loss, a team to a very talented team, a team coming off a loss. Rupp Arena is really, really hard to play at. I was actually looking it up this week. Alabama won at Rupp back in 2021, but that was the year that there were no fans or hardly any fans at games.
And wasn't that the first win in like 50 years up there? It wasn't like
it was the first win since 2006. And so it wasn't that long, but still it's been 18 years since Alabama's won in Lexington against a full crowd. So it's hard to win up there. And they're a good team. They're a talented team. And if Alabama doesn't win, it's not the end of the world because it still has everything else in front of it. And everything is still pointing to that March 2nd game against Tennessee, where every week it feels more and more like that's the game that's going to decide the SEC regular season.
We've been talking to Blake Byler, and we're about to wrap it up here on the Joe Gaither Show. Make sure you go follow him at Blake Byler 45. I got 2 more questions to round us out here. Number 1, from a personal standpoint, I mean, you love basketball, and that's why we love having you. From a personal standpoint, you're going to Rupp Arena tomorrow. What are you looking forward to most?
Oh, just all of it, to be quite honest. Like, Rupp Arena is a bucket list arena for me. I haven't gotten to see a game up there. So just to kind of get the feel of the atmosphere, and it helps that Alabama's as good as they are because it's going to be a big game. Like, the place is going to be packed. Kentucky fans are going to be rowdy. Get to see Big Blue Nation in all of its glory. Like, I'm really excited to actually be there and see Rupp Arena because when you think about some of the most iconic arenas in college basketball, you think of Rupp, and then you kind of go down the blue blood list, like Cameron Indoor, the Dean Dome, like Allen Fieldhouse up in Kansas. Like those are like the arenas whenever you think of college basketball and you think of those atmospheres. So because of that, I'm super excited to get to be there and even more blessed that it's going to be a big game and a game that Kentucky fans are going to get up for, as opposed to if it was Alabama, Kentucky on a Wednesday night 7 years ago, it wouldn't have near the juice that this Saturday CBS top 20 matchup is going to have.
It's going to be a lot of fun, and you're going to be able to follow it at BamaCentral. Follow Blake Byler's coverage, the live updates right there at BamaCentral.com, and all of his inside looks on Twitter at Blake Byler45. Okay, at the beginning of the show, before I had Katie and before I had you, I gave my 7 picks for the weekend. And unfortunately, I'm feeling like about a 6 or 7 point Alabama loss. So that's what I put out there. Blake Byler, what do you think happens tomorrow in Rupp Arena?
This is the one game that, as I've been looking at Alabama's future schedule, that I haven't really been able to pin down. And like full transparency, I think Alabama's going to beat Tennessee. I think Alabama's going to lose to Florida when they play again. So looking ahead at this schedule as I have been the last week or two, every game to me has felt like, oh, I feel like this is going to happen, except this one. I have not been able to nail down what I think about this game. Yesterday or I guess it went up today on Blue Collar Unplugged, my podcast with Jacob Pickle and Matthew Gibson, where we talk about
everybody who's watching the show
basketball.
Subscribes to your show as well, because we tell them every day.
On that episode, which we recorded yesterday, I picked Kentucky. And I don't know. I still think I'm feeling Kentucky in a really close one. But at the same time, like I said earlier, Alabama's been great in close games, and Kentucky hasn't been. So if it is close, and if Kentucky's not just offense on fire, clicking on all cylinders, if Alabama's able to stay in there, the way that Alabama's played close games over the past 2 months of the season and the way that Kentucky has been really bad in the clutch under Calipari in the past 2 to 3 years, it would be hard not to like Alabama's chances in that. The issue is going to be Alabama's defense stepping up and getting it to that point and not letting the Rupp Arena crowd, not letting Big Blue Nation get behind that team and let them go on a run that makes it, an 8 to 10 point game with 4 minutes left instead of it being a 2 to 3 point game.
It's Blake Byler, everybody. You're already following him at Blake Byler45. If you're not, you're living under a rock or you hate basketball, follow him at Blake Byler45. He's going to be driving up to Lexington here in about 5 minutes, and you're going to want to follow all his coverage as he makes the road trip with several of the Blue Collar Unplugged boys. If you haven't seen the new episode, it's already on BamaCentral.com. You can check out the new episode with Blake Byler, Matthew Gibson, and Jacob Pickle. Subscribe, rate, and review. 5 stars for Blue Collar Unplugged. Blake, thanks so much for your time, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. That's Blake Byler, and we're going to round it out here one more time, one more stop with our man Will Miller. Before we bring Will Miller in, we'll hit you one more time with a little Druid City Music Hall. You can go find Druid City Music Hall online at druidcitymusichall.com. They've got a full lineup of their shows. Last night, you heard 49 Winchester. Tonight finishes their 3 nights in a row of concerts with the Stews with special guest Happy Landing. I'm going to be there in the building at Druid City Music Hall. You can buy your tickets at druidcitymusichall.com. All right, Will Miller. We've hit basketball. We've hit gymnastics. We've hit softball. Only one more sport left. How we doing? Follow Will Miller at Real WB Miller on the X Machine. He's going to be in Sewell Thomas Stadium here in about 3 hours. What's going on, man?
Hey, I'm feeling good, Joe. It's another weekend. It's another baseball weekend. Opening day for the Alabama Crimson Tide was 7 days ago, which is almost hard to believe in and of itself. The calendar is absolutely flying this time of year. A lot going on. Now it's the second weekend series, Friday through Sunday. Number 17 Alabama baseball, ranked to begin the season, 5-0 start. There's been a lot, like I said, a lot going on, but also if you are an Alabama fan, a lot to like from this kind of new look roster, new era under head coach Rob Vaughn. It's off to an encouraging start.
Yeah, put us in the Joe, because and give us a sense of some of the newness. I enjoy baseball mildly, but I believe that we have a lot of listeners, a lot of viewers that enjoy Alabama baseball. Look, you've got a huge turnover on the coaching staff and on the team. But you saw, as you outlined, you're now 5-0 after 2 midweek games. So the casual observer and myself says, oh, 5-0, great start. Everything's rocking and rolling. What should we be excited about specifically, or what should we be paying attention to specifically with this baseball team?
Well, in a word, if you want an answer that applies to this exact second, TJ McCants, center fielder, Ole Miss transfer. His bat's been off the freaking wall through the first week of the year. And, he bats really high in the order. You knew he'd be an on-base guy, be a threat to steal a lot of bags. Maybe what you didn't expect as much was the power he's come to offer, but also the production. 3 home runs, 13 RBIs. I mean, that's near tops in the country in that particular statistic, even though it's early. He's been one of the most exciting faces early on. It's been a breakout, even though it's a small sample size. Kim Rankin wrote a great feature about TJ. Went up this morning. I'd encourage everybody to check that out. But the new roster just seems to go really well together so far. And, the offense in particular is almost completely brand new. And even with there are returning players, obviously, but only one returning starter in Matt Gassetti behind the dish. And so with that, there's going to be a lot of transition, a lot of changes. And that's even before you get into the fact that that the coaching staff is largely revamped, even though Jason Jackson did stick around. But it seems like they're firing on all cylinders. It doesn't seem like anything has missed a beat. They ended last summer on a tremendous amount of momentum, even though it fell short of the ultimate goal. But the offense has been great. The defense is really good. The outfielders in particular have been a very effective position group, and that's obviously an entirely new group. You had last season, you had Andrew Pinckney in right, Caden Rose in center, and Tommy Seidel in left, and they're all gone.
I miss Pinckney. I miss that gun, man.
Those are some really, really good baseball players. But right now you have Evan Slight, TJ McCants, and Ian Petrutz, and they're all transfers, and they're patrolling the walls. Obviously, Slight doesn't get it as bad from the right field terrace as the visitors do. They seem to really be enjoying the atmosphere. Their bats are clicking. Their defense is plus. So, but if there is to be a drop-off, it's not evident yet.
All right, so let me ask you about that offense, as you alluded to. We're familiar by now, our 5th year of Nate Oates. We're familiar. We like the layup, dunk, free throw, or three-pointer. None of that mid-range bull crap. 12 none of those 12-foot mid-range shots. Everything is efficient for Alabama basketball. Am I ignorant? And please correct me. But am I ignorant in saying or seeing similarities in Rob Vaughn saying, you know what, I can bring an analytical approach to baseball. It seems like let's hit the long ball. Let's get it out. Let's mash, baby. We're either going to home run. You've seen the MLB trends over the last 5 years of home run or strikeout, nothing in between, eliminating the small ball. Am I right on seeing similarities with Rob Vaughn? Please correct me. And then 2, can it work at the college level?
Well, to answer your second question first, Joe, they hit with aluminum bats, so I'll let you fill in the blank on that one. Question 1, absolutely, there's going to be a lot of power in this lineup. I'd point to Bryce Eblin, who's a very versatile infielder who has started a number of games over the past couple of years, but he missed a lot of last year because he was hurt. And he played multiple different positions. So he's found a groove over the last couple of games. Took him a while to get his first hit, but he hit a really, really long home run on Tuesday night. And he's one of the underrated power aspects of the lineup. He's always had pop in his bat. And there's a power hitter leading off in Gage Miller who will play either third base or DH. And if he's not playing third base, it's probably going to be Eblin. But you have also guys at the bottom of the order that are going to hit for power, like Camden Hayslip. You were there in the fall, right, Joe? And you watched him, Coleman Coliseum very nearly became acquainted with some baseballs last fall in those exhibitions, and he was sending them. And he's batted 7th in the games that he's come in so far, which he did have a finger injury, a thumb injury, so he's not played every single game. But the point being, it's up and down the order. It's not 1 through 9. Every single guy's going to be expected to hit a home run every turn at the plate. But there's a nice balance throughout the order of guys who, if the guys in front of him are going to get on, he's going to have a chance to send it a long way. And that is a bit different from some of the baseball philosophy that you're really going to see from a lot of conventional, a lot of purists who don't want to bat a power guy lead off. But that's what's happening here. And Gage Miller does have multiple home runs so far this season, even though it's only been 5 games. But it's this approach, and he calls it the pack mentality. He wants to – it's part of the brand of baseball. He wants the offense to hit a lot of home runs. He did compare it to boxing. I know we talk about combat sports here on this program. We have, the two of us, a good amount. And he said, it's all about jab, haymaker is what he said. And he wants guys throughout the lineup that are, when the time's right, are going to deliver that haymaker. And throughout the lineup, those guys are there.
Well, we're going to see Alabama back in action today, this afternoon, taking on Valparaiso. It's going to be a 3-game set this weekend in Sewell Thomas Stadium. You can follow us on BamaCentral.com for live updates and for sidebars and analysis. Follow Real WB Miller on the Twitter machine for all of his coverage as well. Look, tell me about Riley Quick. Every year, that just seems like the casual narrative. Every year, Connor Prelip, you got now Riley Quick. Last year, I had the name.
Grayson Hitt.
Grayson Hitt was, yes. I mean, you've had guys injured from the pitching from the starting pitching position over the last handful of years. Is it an Alabama specific issue? Is it just a cultural? These guys are working their arms too hard at this age, just the way baseball is, or is it just bad luck?
I think it could be a mixture. It's no secret guys are throwing harder than ever. Greg Ferrone, who's going to start this Sunday in his first weekend start, that dude throws hard. That dude's going to touch some high numbers. And I'm not, and I knock on wood right now as we speak. I'm not saying that in the context of he's going to get injured. But the point being, velocity has taken a lot more precedent than when, like a Greg Maddux was pitching, who would just beat people with his IQ and his pitch selection. One of the best pitchers of all time, by the way, throwing 102 and everything. But there is part of that. These guys are 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. It puts a lot of strain on the arm. There's science that pitching a baseball is an unnatural motion that puts strain on the arm. But you do have to wonder to what degree all this is bad luck. Connor Prelip was a great prospect. He would have been a first rounder if he played his last year in college. I feel he was projected there by a lot of people. Grayson Hitt was supposed to be the staff ace last year, and I know Luke Holman did a great job filling that role when his number was called. But people, I feel like the recent events that have happened in terms of the resurgence of the program have made people forget what Grayson Hitt was, and the fact that him having Tommy John surgery changed the season. And he wasn't the only starting pitcher last season to be injured. Garrett McMillan didn't start the year because he spent time on the shelf, and he was a fixture of the pitching staff for 2 years. And every position gets injured. Caden Rose was hurt a lot. Bryce Eblin was hurt a lot. I mentioned another guy who's started a lot of games and now is going to return and find his groove, but he struggled with injuries. Ben Hess, the ace this year, has struggled with injuries the last 2 years. He's a junior, and he had a season-ending injury last year. I think part of it is just bad luck. Time will tell. You hate it for Riley Quick, who was ready for an expanded role. He was excited for that role, and he gets 3 innings, and he has to have Tommy John. That's what you hate the most. I feel like, and there's never a good time for these things to happen, of course. But right when you're just getting back into it, it has to just be deflating, and you hate it for him.
Absolutely. So we'll pay attention to the baseball program as they have several quality arms still remaining. Here's my last question for you, Will Miller. I asked a SEC baseball fan yesterday, can this baseball program finish in the top 4 in the conference? In as far as the standings go, we know the SEC is hard, like the most brutal conference in college baseball. It would be an accomplishment. I don't expect them to win the league by any means, but
if they win the league, Rob Vaughn gets a statue, Joe.
Yes, because that's how hard it is, and that's how talented the league is. But can we hope for, or can we expect, or can we set a standard of this program can be a top 4 program in the conference, and can that start this year?
it'll really depend on these conference results. Alabama has some big conference home games this year in particular. You look at teams on the schedule. They have LSU, which is one of the best teams in the country, Tennessee, South Carolina, Arkansas, all coming to Tuscaloosa this year. Now, that's a key thing, Joe. Those are home series. Now, that's going to be the difference. You know, it's a lot easier to go 2-1 if you're playing the games at home. And those are going to be the key series wins that you're looking at. I think on paper, the 4 spots are spoken for. You've got LSU, Florida, Arkansas, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, South Carolina's a really good team.
It's loaded down the line.
Years. I mean, Rob Vaughn said in the preseason availability is somewhere around there. He felt like if you're a top 8 team in the SEC, you're hosting a regional, and that proved to be true. Alabama hosted a regional last year, and they were right around there. They were in that 8-9 game. They were the number 9 seed in the SEC tournament bracket in 2023. So I mean, that's right. That right about tracks. And the 8 seed Kentucky did host a regional as well. And you're right, Joe. This is so stacked. It's the best league in college baseball. And obviously, people are looking to Wake Forest as the class of the sport once again, mostly because of their pitching stable, which includes a Tennessee transfer who's elite and throws really freaking hard. I would encourage you to watch him if you haven't. But yeah, this league, to finish in the top 4 in the league, it doesn't matter whether you're a top 5 team or whether you're unranked. Finishing in the top 4 in the SEC is a tremendous accomplishment. And obviously Auburn, hosted a regional last year. They've been to 2 College World Series in the past 5 years. That's a program that, many people feel good about right now, and they're Alabama's rival. It was Alabama's first SEC series win last year, and Alabama beat them again in the SEC tournament. I mean, so many teams you could throw around in this league, even outside the top 4. If you finish in the top 6, you're golden. And that can happen. You can see this Alabama team be the number 6 or number 7 team in the league, and you're in good shape to host a regional at that point.
This has been Will Miller, and we're hanging out talking about Alabama baseball on the Joe Gaither Show. Look, Alabama baseball taking on Valparaiso in a 3-game set right there at Sewell Thomas Stadium. It's currently 65 degrees in Tuscaloosa. It's going to be beautiful weather, at least for the Friday. I haven't looked at the Saturday and Sunday. I imagine this will be a great time to get out and see the guys and support Rob Vaughn. Will, tell everybody about your coverage and about your plans for the weekend.
Yeah, I'll be at the Joe all weekend. First pitch at 4 p.m. today, 2 tomorrow, and 1 p.m. on Sunday. And like I said, second weekend series of the year, things are back in full swing. People seem excited. I'm really encouraged by these crowds I've seen at the Joe. I've been covering baseball part-time for the past couple of years, and the crowds are definitely on the upswing as well. But I will be having all your baseball coverage this year. And from the games, be sure to keep up with me. Joe's mentioned my Twitter is @RealWBMiller. That's where you'll be able to find all my stuff. We'll have updates. We'll have, the occasional instant analysis. I won't have somebody with me every single time, but the times we do, there will be things of that nature. There'll be sidebars. There'll be features, all sorts of things. Feels like, there's a whole lot in front of us with the season just getting started, but keep up with BamaCentral for everything.
All right, my man. Look, from this past weekend, you and Kim Rankin are good-looking people. So what I want you to do is you frame up this instant analysis. You see how you and I are like right close to each other. You can see our picture and our faces. I don't need to see Will Miller's belt in any more instant analysis videos. I want to see you and Kim's bright, shining faces because you're beautiful people. You know what you're talking about. Get the camera right, nice and tight on you so you can talk about this Alabama baseball program.
Chris told you to say that?
No, he didn't. I said that myself. I think your analysis is strong, and I just think that would raise the quality of your coverage by 10%.
Appreciate the tip, Joe. I'll keep that in mind. I was a little joke for myself there. I always appreciate the feedback, and thank you for watching. But you all can watch it too on BamaCentral.com. You all can keep up, like I said, with all our coverage. We talked about it for the past several minutes here on this program. It's going to be a really, really exciting season with a lot in store. You won't want to miss any of it.
Absolutely. And you can find that right there at BamaCentral.com and at Real WB Miller on the X machine for all baseball-related news. Will, I got to get you back next week. Eric Anders is fighting again. He's going into the cage next Saturday, right? Mm-hmm. So we got to talk about that next week. And maybe we can get old Eric Anders on the program 10, 15 minutes, talk about how he's going to crack some skulls in the UFC next weekend.
Oh, that'd be great, Joe. Just let me know, man.
Thanks so much. That's real WB Miller, Will Miller on the Joe Gaither Show. And we just had a lot of fun catching up with all of the BamaCentral experts. You heard from Katie Windham on Alabama softball and gymnastics. You heard from Blake Byler on Alabama basketball. And you heard from Will Miller on Alabama baseball. It's going to be a huge weekend at the Capstone this weekend. Obviously, basketball is going away, but everybody else is at home. Gymnastics, softball, and baseball at home this weekend. Come into Tuscaloosa and check out some of your favorite programs. Support the Crimson Tide. Support this program, the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral, by subscribing, rating, and reviewing it on Apple Podcast, Amazon, or Spotify, or give it a follow on the BamaCentral YouTube channel. We'd appreciate you so much. You can always connect with us at Joe Gaither 6 on your favorite social media channel, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, whatever you like, at Joe Gaither 6. And we hope you all have a great weekend. We're going to be gumping out right here on BamaCentral.com and covering all the sports. Live updates for all the sports, post-game, pre-game, injury analysis right there at BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com. So for Katie Windham, Blake Byler, and for Will Miller, I'm Joe Gaither, and we'll be back on Monday with another edition of the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com.
Thanks for joining us on today's edition of the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral. Keep up with Joe on all his social media pages at Joe Gaither 6. Subscribe, rate, and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and be sure to read us daily at BamaCentral.com.